All right, settle down, everyone. Grab a seat, find some floor space. I don't care. Just get comfortable. Put the phones away, unless you're live tweeting how brilliant I am, in which case carry on, but keep it on silent. Today, we're diving into a narrative that's essentially the 9th century BCE version of a high octane superhero transition film. We're looking at the book of 2nd Kings, specifically chapters 1 through 4, which chronicles the passing of the torch, or rather, the passing of the flaming mantle, from the prophet Elijah to his successor, Elisha. Now, I know what you're thinking, Professor. It's a dusty old text about guys in robes. Trust me, by the time we're done, you'll realize this is more like a blend of The Prestige, a gritty war drama, and a medical miracle show. Let's start with a provocative question. If you knew your boss was about to be literally abducted by a whirlwind into heaven, would you ask for a promotion or a vacation? Because Elisha, he asks for the hardest job on the planet, and he asks for it in double. But before we get to the chariot of fire, we have to deal with King Ahaziah. It's the beginning of 2nd Kings, and things are already a mess. Ahaziah is the king of Israel, and he's just had a very bad day. He fell through a lattice in his upper chamber. Pro tip for the aspiring monarchs in the room: don't lean on 9th century IKEA furniture. It doesn't end well. He's lying there, injured, and instead of asking the God of Israel for help, he sends messengers to consult Baal-zebub, the god of Ekron. It's like having a life-threatening illness and deciding to check your symptoms on a sketchy, unverified conspiracy forum instead of calling a doctor. Elijah, who's basically the human version of a do not touch sign, intercepts this. He tells the messengers to go back and tell the king. Is it because there's no God in Israel that you're asking a fly god for medical advice? Since you did that, you aren't getting out of that bed. You're toast. And I mean that somewhat literally. When the king hears this, he's furious. He sends a captain with 50 soldiers to arrest Elijah. Now, imagine this. Elijah is sitting on top of a hill, probably just minding his own prophetic business, and this captain rolls up and says, "Man of God, the king says come down." Elijah's response is the ultimate "I wish you would" moment. He says, "If I'm a man of God, let fire come down from heaven and consume you." And boom, charbroiled soldiers. The king, apparently a slow learner, sends another 50. Same result. It isn't until the third captain shows up, gets on his knees, and basically says, "Look, I'm just a guy doing his job. Please don't incinerate me," that Elijah agrees to go. He delivers the news to the king's face: "You're going to die." And he does. This sets the stage for the big transition in chapter 2. This is the end of an era episode. Elijah and Elisha are traveling from Gilgal to Bethel to Jericho to the Jordan. It's like a farewell tour. 3 times Elijah tries to ditch Elisha. He says, "Stay here, the Lord sent me further." And 3 times Elisha gives him the most loyal, stubborn response: "As the Lord lives and as your soul lives, I will not leave you." Elisha is that friend who refuses to let you go to the grocery store alone because he's afraid he'll miss something legendary. He has major FOMO, fear of missing out on the prophetic anointing. They get to the Jordan River. 50 sons of the prophets, basically the theology grad students of the day, are watching from a distance. Elijah takes his mantle, his cloak, wraps it up, and whacks the water with it. The Jordan parts. They walk across on dry ground. It's a total throwback to Moses in the Red Sea. It's Elijah saying, "Yeah, I've still got it." Then comes the moment. Elijah asks, "What can I do for you before I'm taken?" Elisha doesn't hesitate. He asks for a double portion of Elijah's spirit. Now stay with me, because this isn't just about being twice as holy. In ancient inheritance law, the eldest son got a double portion. Elisha is claiming the right to be the primary heir, the one who carries the weight of the office. Elijah says, "You've asked a hard thing, but if you see me when I'm taken, it's yours." And then, the special effects budget goes through the roof. A chariot of fire and horses of fire appear, separating the two of them, and Elijah is carried up in a whirlwind. Elisha sees it. He cries out, "My father! My father!" He's heartbroken, but he notices something left behind. The mantle. This is the baton in the relay race. Elisha picks it up. He goes back to the Jordan. The grad students are still watching, probably taking notes, and he does exactly what Elijah did. He strikes the water and asks, "Where is the Lord God of Elijah?" The water parts. The transition is complete. He's no longer the assistant. He's the man. But it's not all chariots and fire. Immediately, Elisha has to deal with real-world problems. In Jericho, the water is bad and the land is barren. Elisha takes some salt in a new bowl, throws it into the spring, and heals the water. It's his first act of restorative ministry. But then things get weird. He's heading up to Bethel, and a bunch of youths, likely a gang of young mockers, start shouting, "Go up, you bald head!" I know, bear with me. This sounds harsh. Elisha curses them in the name of the Lord, and 2 female bears come out of the woods and maul 42 of them. Now, before you think Elisha is just sensitive about his hairline, remember that bald head was an insult to his authority, and go up was a mocking reference to Elijah's ascension. It was a direct challenge to the prophetic office. Still, definitely not a story you'll see on a Hallmark card. Yes, this will be on the exam, so remember, respect the prophet or watch out for bears. Moving on to chapter 3, we get into some geopolitics. We have a triple alliance situation. King Jehoram of Israel, who's bad, but not Ahab bad. King Jehoshaphat of Judah, the good guy, and the king of Edom are going to war against Moab. They march for 7 days through the wilderness, and shocker, they run out of water. They're in a logistical nightmare. Jehoshaphat, being the spiritual one, asks if there's a prophet nearby. One of the servants says, "Well, there's Elisha, the guy who used to pour water on Elijah's hands." I love that description. It's like saying, there's the guy who used to be the intern. The 3 kings go down to see Elisha. Elisha looks at the king of Israel and basically says, "Why are you here? Go talk to your parents' fake prophets. If it weren't for King Jehoshaphat being here, I wouldn't even look at you." He's got that Elijah-level sass. Then he asks for a minstrel, a musician. Stay with me here. Elisha needs the right atmosphere. As the music plays, the hand of the Lord comes on him. He gives them a bizarre command. Make this valley full of ditches. Think of it like your Netflix algorithm. You have to provide the data, the ditches, before it can give you the recommendations. The water. He tells them they won't see wind or rain, but the valley will be filled. And the next morning, during the sacrifice, water comes rushing in from the direction of Edom. The land is filled, but here's the kicker. The Moabites wake up, see the sun reflecting off the water, and because the soil is red, the water looks like blood. They think the three kings have turned on each other and slaughtered themselves. They rush in to loot the camp, completely unprepared, and the Israelites crush them. It's a victory delivered through a combination of divine plumbing and an optical illusion. Finally, let's look at chapter 4, which is a rapid-fire series of miracles that show Elisha's heart for the little people. This is where the lecture gets genuinely moving. First, there's the widow of one of the sons of the prophets. She's in debt, and the creditors are coming to take her 2 sons as slaves. It's a desperate, heartbreaking situation. Elisha asks, "What do you have in the house?" She says, "Nothing but a jar of oil." He tells her to borrow every empty jar she can find from her neighbors. "Don't borrow just a few," he says. She shuts the door, starts pouring, and the oil just keeps coming. It only stops when she runs out of jars. She sells the oil, pays her debts, and lives on the rest. It's a miracle of multiplication and dignity. Then we have the Shunammite woman. She's wealthy and realizes Elisha is a holy man of God, so she builds him a little prophet studio on her roof. Bed, table, stool, lamp. Very minimalist, very chic. Elisha wants to thank her, so he tells her she'll have a son in a year. She's stunned. She's like, "Don't lie to me, man of God." But a year later, she has a boy. Fast forward a few years, the boy is out in the field with his dad, complains of a headache, likely sunstroke, and dies in his mother's arms. This woman is a powerhouse. She doesn't cry, doesn't tell her husband the kid is dead. She just saddles a donkey and flies to Elisha at Mount Carmel. When Elisha's servant Gehazi meets her and asks if everything is okay, she says it is well. Think about that. Her son is dead on a bed at home, and she says it is well. That is what we call spiritual vision. She isn't looking at the corpse. She's looking at the source of the promise. She gets to Elisha, grabs his feet, and won't let go. Elisha realizes something is wrong. He goes back with her, goes into the room, shuts the door, and prays. He stretches himself out on the child. Warmth returns, he does it again. The boy sneezes 7 times. "Bless you, bless you, bless you. Okay, we get it," and opens his eyes. Life restored. We wrap up chapter 4 with 2 more food miracles. There's a famine, and the prophets are making a stew. Someone accidentally shreds wild gourds into the pot, and suddenly everyone is shouting, "There is death in the pot." Elisha just throws some flour in, not because flour is an antidote to poison, but as a sign of God's healing, and the stew is fine. Then a man brings 20 loaves of barley bread to feed 100 people. Elisha says, "Give it to them." The servant is skeptical. 20 loaves for 100 guys? That's barely a snack. But they eat, and they have leftovers. So, what's the takeaway here? Before you all rush off to lunch? The common thread through all these stories, the fire, the chariot, the ditches, the oil, the resurrected boy, is false vision. Elisha was a man of spiritual vision. When he was surrounded by the Syrian army later in the book, which we'll get to, I promise, his servant was terrified. Elisha prayed, "Lord, open his eyes that he may see." And the servant saw the mountain full of horses and chariots of fire. Elisha didn't pray according to what he saw with his natural eyes. He prayed according to the unlimited ability of God. Elisha lived in the double portion. He transitioned from operating in the natural to the supernatural. He saw beyond the death in the pot and the empty jars. He saw the provision. So, as you go out today, don't just look at your problems with your physical eyes. Whether it's a mounting pile of debt, a dead dream, or just a really difficult midterm, try to see the horses and chariots surrounding you. Pick up the mantle of persistence. And for heaven's sake, if you see a bear, run. Class dismissed. See you next time. All right, everybody. Settle down. Settle down. I see you back there. Put the phone away. Yes, I know the espresso in the student union is terrible today, but I promise this lecture will be more of a jolt to your system than any triple shot latte. Now imagine for a second that you're watching a show that makes Game of Thrones look like a G-rated puppet show. We're talking about blood, coups, miraculous bone revivals, and political decisions so bad they'd make a modern diplomat weep into their kale smoothie. Today, we're diving into the meat of 2 Kings, specifically the era from Jehu's bloody uprising all the way to the heartbreaking finale, where the northern kingdom of Israel essentially gets its eviction notice from the Assyrian Empire. Now let's start with a guy who probably wouldn't have passed his driving test today, Jehu. If you were a watchman on a tower in Jezreel back then, you'd see a dust cloud on the horizon and think, "Oh, that's Jehu. I can tell because he drives like a maniac." That's actually in the text. He driveth furiously. Jehu's on a mission from God, via the prophet Elisha, to basically end the house of Ahab. And let me tell you, Jehu doesn't do subtle. He meets King Joram of Israel and King Ahaziah of Judah in a field, the very field Ahab stole from Naboth. Talk about poetic justice. And he takes Joram out with a single arrow. Ahaziah tries to make a run for it, but Jehu's like, "Nope, him too." Then we get to Jezebel. You've heard the name, right? It's basically shorthand for trouble. She hears Jehu is coming. And does she hide? No. She puts on her makeup, fixes her hair, and looks out the window to trash talk him as he rolls up. It's a bold move, but it doesn't end well. Jehu just looks up and says, "Who's on my side?" 2 or 3 eunuchs look out. He tells them to throw her down. And, well, let's just say the dogs of the city had a very big dinner that night. By the time they went to bury her, there was nothing left but her skull, feet, and palms. I know. It's gruesome. But stay with me, because Jehu is just getting started. He sends letters to the elders in Samaria. He's basically like, "Hey, Ahab has 70 sons left. Pick the best one and let's fight." The elders are terrified. They say, "2 kings couldn't stand before this guy, how can we?" So they decide to be his servants. Jehu says, Fine. If you're with me, bring me the heads of those 70 sons tomorrow. And they do. They put them in baskets. Jehu has them piled in 2 heaps at the city gate. It's a marketing campaign based entirely on terror. But Jehu's magnum opus of deception was the great ball party. He tells everyone, Ahab served Baal a little, but Jehu shall serve him much. He calls a mandatory assembly for every Baal worshipper in the country. He even gives them all special vestments so he can identify them. It's like a themed party, but the theme is imminent doom. Once they're all packed into the temple, he makes sure there are no followers of the Lord inside. Then he sends in 80 soldiers to finish the job. He turns the temple of Baal into a latrine. Literally. It's a total purge. However, and this will be on the exam part, Jehu didn't go all the way. He kept the golden calves that Jeroboam set up. He did the bloody house cleaning part of the job, but he didn't quite stick the spiritual landing. Because of that, his dynasty was limited to 4 generations. Now, while Jehu is busy painting Israel red, things in Judah get weirdly Disney villain. Queen Athaliah, Ahab's daughter, go figure, sees her son Ahaziah is dead and decides she wants the throne for herself. Her solution? Kill every remaining member of the royal family. She's like the anti-grandmother. But there's a hero in the nursery, Jehosheba. She grabs baby Joash, hides him in a bedroom, and then keeps him stashed away in the temple for 6 years while Athaliah reigns. Think of Joash like a tiny secret agent. In the 7th year, Jehoiada the priest decides it's time. He gathers the guards, gives them King David's old spears and shields. It's very retro chic, and they crown the 7-year-old kid. When Athaliah hears the cheering, she runs in crying, "Treason! Treason!" which is a bit rich coming from her. They escort her out and, well, she's gone. Joash starts off as a great king because he has Jehoiada whispering in his ear. His big project? Temple repairs. The place was a mess. But here's the thing. The priests were taking the money but not doing the work. It's like hiring a contractor who just spends your deposit on a new truck and never shows up. Joash eventually has to step in and say, "Enough." They make a chest, bore a hole in the lid, the first piggy bank, and put it by the altar. People drop their money in, they give it directly to the carpenters and masons, and the work finally gets done. Accountability, folks. It's a novel concept. Sadly, Joash's reign ends on a sour note. He pays off Hazael of Syria with temple treasures to stop an invasion, and he's eventually assassinated by his own servants. Now I want to take a quick detour back to Elisha. He's on his deathbed, and King Jehoash of Israel, not the same Joash from Judah, I know the names are confusing, keep your charts out, comes to see him. Elisha gives him a prophetic test. Take some arrows and strike the ground, he says. Jehoash strikes the ground 3 times and stops. Elisha gets furious. You should have struck it 5 or 6 times. Then you'd have totally consumed Syria. Now you'll only beat them 3 times. It's like Elisha is saying, "Where's your passion, man? Where's your drive?" Even in death, Elisha was a powerhouse. There's a crazy story right after he dies where some people are burying a man, see a band of Moabites coming, and they just shove the body into Elisha's tomb. As soon as the body touches Elisha's bones, the guy comes back to life and stands up. Talk about a no refunds burial. Moving on to Amaziah in Judah. He's a good, but not great king. He has this massive victory over Edom, and it goes straight to his head. He sends a challenge to the king of Israel. Come, let us look one another in the face. It's basically a 1v1 me bro text. The king of Israel sends back this hilarious, insulting analogy about a thistle in Lebanon asking a cedar for its daughter in marriage, only for a wild beast to come along and trample the thistle. He's saying, "You're the thistle, Amaziah. Sit down." Amaziah doesn't sit down. He fights, he loses, the walls of Jerusalem get broken down, and he ends up dead in a conspiracy. Then we get Jeroboam II in the north. If you were looking at the GDP and the borders, you'd think Israel was back in the Golden Age. He recovers a ton of territory. And here's the theological kicker, it's not because they were good. The text says God saw the bitter affliction of Israel and saved them by the hand of Jeroboam II because he didn't want to blot out their name yet. It was a mercy extension on their lease, but they were still trashing the apartment. After Jeroboam II, the north goes into a total tailspin. It's like a game of musical chairs, where the person who gets the chair is immediately stabbed. Zechariah reigns 6 months, Shallum kills him, reigns 1 month. Menahem kills Shallum and reigns 10 years, but he's basically a puppet who has to pay the Assyrian king, Pul, 1,000 talents of silver to stay in power. Where does he get the money? He taxes the wealthy men of Israel 50 shekels each. It's basically a massive protection racket. Then you've got Pekahiah, who gets killed by Pekah, who then has to deal with Tiglath-Pileser. Yes, that's his real name. Sounds like a character from a steampunk novel. Who starts carrying people away into captivity. Meanwhile, in Judah, we meet Ahaz. If there was a Worst King award, Ahaz is a top contender. He's facing a coalition of Syria and Israel. And instead of trusting God, he sends a message to the king of Assyria, saying, "I am thy servant and thy son. Come up and save me." He's literally selling his soul for a security guard. He takes the silver and gold from the temple and sends it as a bribe. Then he goes to Damascus to meet the Assyrian king, sees an altar there, and thinks, "Ooh, I love the aesthetic." He sends the blueprints back to the priest in Jerusalem and says, "Build me one of these." He starts offering sacrifices on this new pagan-inspired altar and pushes the original bronze altar to the side. He even shuts down parts of the temple. He's the guy who buys a historic mansion and immediately guts it to put in cheap neon lights. Finally, we reach the end of the road for the northern kingdom. Hoshea is the last king of Israel. He tries to play a double game, paying tribute to Assyria while secretly texting the king of Egypt for help. The king of Assyria, Shalmaneser, finds out, shuts him up in prison, and besieges Samaria for 3 years. In the 9th year of Hoshea, the city falls. The people of Israel are carried away to Assyria, and they're scattered. The author of Kings then takes a moment to do a post-game analysis. Why did this happen? Why did the 10 tribes just vanish into history? It wasn't because the Assyrians were inherently better soldiers. It was because the Israelites feared other gods. They built high places in every city. They set up images. They burnt incense to idols. They caused their sons and daughters to pass through the fire, which is a polite way of saying child sacrifice, and they ignored every single prophet who told them to turn back. They hardened their necks. It's a tragic end. They wanted to be like the nations around them, and eventually, the nations around them just swallowed them whole. The takeaway here, class, and yes, you should write this down, is that in the world of 2 Kings, power without principle is just a countdown to a crash. Whether it's Jehu's half-hearted reforms, Joash's contractors stealing the repair fund, or Ahaz's obsession with foreign altars. These kings were constantly trying to find workarounds for their problems instead of dealing with the root cause. So, next time you're tempted to take a shortcut on your midterm or borrow your roommate's leftovers without asking, just remember the thistle and the cedar. Don't be the thistle, because there's always a wild beast in Lebanon ready to trample you if you get too big for your boots. That's it for today. Don't forget, the readings for next week cover Hezekiah. Spoiler alert, things actually get a little better for a minute. Class dismissed. All right, everyone, settle down. Put the phones away, unless you're using them to look up 2 Kings, in which case carry on, you overachievers. Today, we're diving into the absolute chaotic finale of the Kingdom of Judah. If you think your family Thanksgiving is dramatic, you haven't seen anything yet. We're talking about Judah's final kings, Hezekiah to the Babylonian exile. It's a saga of religious reboots, trash-talking generals, a literal divine sundial glitch, and a tragic ending that would make a prestige TV showrunner weep. Now, let's start with a provocative question. Is it possible for a nation to have a point of no return? I'm talking about that moment where the trajectory is so set, the momentum so heavy, that even a literal saint in the driver's seat can't stop the crash. That's the question looming over our primary sources today. We're picking up the story with Hezekiah. Now, Hezekiah is basically the David 2.0 the kingdom had been waiting for. You've got to understand, the northern kingdom of Israel, they're gone. History. Wiped out by the Assyrian Empire, which was basically the Borg of the ancient world. Resistance was futile. And now, the Assyrians are at the front door of Judah, knocking with a battering ram. Hezekiah is interesting because he doesn't just pay the tribute and hide under the bed. He cleans house. He's the king who finally says, you know all those high places where everyone's been doing their own DIY religion? We're shutting them down. He's the first one to really get serious about centralizing worship in Jerusalem. It's a massive cultural pivot. Think of it like a CEO coming in and firing the entire middle management to refocus on the core product. But then Sennacherib shows up. The king of Assyria sends his top PR guy, the Rabshakeh, to stand outside the walls of Jerusalem and talk trash. And honestly, his psychological warfare is top tier. He's standing there shouting in the local language, telling the people, don't listen to Hezekiah. Your God isn't going to save you. Look at all the other gods we've crushed. Did the gods of Hamath or Arpad save them? Spoiler alert, nope. He even tells them that if they surrender, they'll all get a nice plot of land and some grapes. It's the ancient equivalent of a predatory LinkedIn recruitment message. Hezekiah's reaction is what makes him a legend. He doesn't go to his generals first. He goes to the temple and literally spreads out Sennacherib's threatening letter on the floor like he's saying, okay, God, your move. He calls up the prophet Isaiah, who, by the way, is the coolest advisor anyone could have, and Isaiah basically says, don't sweat it, the Assyrians aren't even going to shoot an arrow into this city. And then, the weirdest thing in the history of warfare happens. The text says an angel sweeps through the Assyrian camp and 185,000 soldiers just don't wake up. Sennacherib does a U-turn, heads back to Nineveh, and gets assassinated by his own sons while worshiping his god. Talk about an ironic ending. But stay with me, because even heroes have their oops moments. Hezekiah gets sick, is told he's going to die, and he prays so hard that God gives him 15 more years. To prove it, God makes the shadow on the sundial go backward, 10 degrees. It's a glitch in the matrix, folks. But then some envoys from a little-known upstart city called Babylon show up. They're like, hey, we heard you were sick. Nice place you got here. And Hezekiah, in a moment of pure look-at-my-stuff vanity, shows them everything. The gold, the silver, the weapon stores. He shows them the PIN code to the national vault. Isaiah walks in and asks, so, what did you show them? Hezekiah's like, everything. They're so nice. And Isaiah just sighs and says, great. Now everything you showed them is going to end up in Babylon. It's the ultimate cautionary tale about oversharing on social media. Now, here's where it gets dark. After Hezekiah dies, his son Manasseh takes over. And Manasseh is the anti-Hezekiah. He doesn't just bring back the idols, he builds altars to the stars inside the temple itself. He's practicing sorcery, consulting mediums, and, this is the heavy part, sacrificing his own children. He's the villain of the story. The text tells us he shed so much innocent blood that Jerusalem was filled from one end to the other. Manasseh reigns for 55 years. Think about that. Most of the good kings died young or had short reigns, but the guy who literally broke the covenant into a million pieces got over half a century. Life isn't fair, and the Bible doesn't try to pretend it is. But here's the kicker. The writers of 2 Kings make it clear that Manasseh's reign was the tipping point. Even though God is patient, the moral debt Manasseh racked up was so massive that Judah's credit was permanently canceled. But wait, there's a plot twist. Enter Josiah, Manasseh's grandson. He becomes king at age 8. Imagine an 8-year-old running the country. Actually, don't imagine that. It's terrifying. But Josiah grows up to be a reformer. When he's 18, he's having the temple repaired. It's probably pretty dusty and dilapidated after Manasseh's star worship parties. And the high priest Hilkiah finds a book. I found the book of the law, he says. Now pause. Imagine you're cleaning out your attic and you find the original lost Constitution of the United States. And you realize we've been doing everything wrong for 100 years. That's Josiah's moment. He reads it, realizes they're in deep trouble, and he tears his clothes in grief. He goes on an absolute rampage of reform. He tears down the idols. He burns the groves. He even digs up the bones of old idolatrous priests and burns them on their own altars. He's the extreme home makeover spiritual edition king. He holds a Passover so massive and so faithful that the text says nothing like it had been seen since the days of the judges. But, and this is the most tragic but in the Bible, it doesn't change the outcome. God says, Josiah, you're great. I love the heart. You won't see the disaster coming. But for everyone else, the Manasseh debt still has to be paid. Josiah dies in a somewhat unnecessary battle against Pharaoh Necho at Megiddo, and with him the last spark of hope for Judah's independence fades out. Now we're in the final spiral. This is where it gets confusing because all the kings have names starting with Jehu. We've got Jehoahaz, then Jehoiakim, then Jehoiachin, then Zedekiah. It's like a really depressing boy band. Jehoiakim is basically a puppet of Egypt, then a puppet of Babylon. He's the one who sees the first wave of Babylonian pressure. Then his son, Jehoiachin, takes the throne, and after only 3 months, Nebuchadnezzar, the big boss of Babylon, shows up. He besieges Jerusalem and takes Jehoiachin away to Babylon, along with all the treasures Hezekiah had bragged about a century earlier. He also takes the mighty men of valor and the craftsmen. He basically brain drains the nation. Among those taken, a young guy named Ezekiel, and likely Daniel. But Nebuchadnezzar isn't done. He leaves a guy named Zedekiah on the throne. Zedekiah is Josiah's son, but he's got none of his dad's backbone. He rebels against Babylon, which is essentially suicide. Nebuchadnezzar comes back, and this time he isn't just taking prisoners. He surrounds Jerusalem for 2 years. People are starving. It's horrific. Finally, the walls are breached. Zedekiah tries to make a run for it through the king's garden. Shout out to the gardeners who kept that exit clear. But he gets caught near Jericho. And this is a Game of Thrones level of grim. The Babylonians kill his sons right in front of him, and then they put out his eyes. The last thing he ever saw was the end of his dynasty. Then comes the final blow. Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, arrives with orders to burn it all down. The temple that Solomon built, torched. The royal palace, burned. The walls of Jerusalem, torn down. The massive bronze pillars and the brazen sea, that giant ornamental pool, are broken into pieces and hauled off as scrap metal. Most of the remaining people are deported. Only the poorest of the land are left to be vine dressers and plowmen. And just when you think it can't get any more depressing, the Babylonians appoint a local governor named Gedaliah. He seems like a decent guy, trying to pick up the pieces, but a few months later, he gets assassinated by a group of Judean nationalists. The remaining people are so terrified of Babylonian retaliation that they all flee to Egypt, the very place they were liberated from a millennium before. It's a full circle tragedy. So class, why does this matter? Is this just a list of dead kings and burned buildings? No. It's about the spiritual cycle. It's about the idea that leadership matters, but so does the deep-seated culture of a people. You can have a Hezekiah or a Josiah, but if the Manasseh in the culture is too strong, the collapse is inevitable. But wait, look at the very last few verses of 2 Kings 25. This is the post-credits scene that changes the whole vibe. 37 years into his exile in Babylon, King Jehoiachin, remember the 3-month king, is released from prison by the new Babylonian king, Evil Merodach. Yes, that was his real name. He speaks kindly to Jehoiachin, gives him a seat of honor at his own table, and gives him a regular allowance for the rest of his life. Why end a tragedy with a guy getting a food allowance? Because it's a glimmer. It's a sign that the line of David isn't totally extinct. The city is gone, the temple is gone, the land is gone, but the promise is still breathing. It's the original to be continued. And that's the takeaway for today, guys. Sometimes the point of no return is just a reset button for something completely different. Now, go enjoy your lunch, and for the love of everything, don't show anyone your bank PIN if they visit from Babylon. See you next time.